Text, Jobcast by Indeed. How to prove yourself for a promotion. Brandy Warwas.
At Indeed, we think a lot about how to help you find a new job. But what about when the next step in your career is getting promoted? That's what we'll talk about in this workshop, specifically focusing on the step up to a management or leadership role. By the end of this session, you'll know how to position yourself as a leader on the rise, clarify and communicate your vision for your promotion, and persuasively make your case for the next step in your career.
Meet your hosts.
Here to talk you through all those how-tos is Emilie Aries. Emilie is a speaker, podcast host, author, and the founder and CEO of Bossed Up, an award-winning personal and professional development community where she helps women craft happy, healthy, and sustainable career paths. And that's me, Brandy Warwas. I'm on Indeed's Job Seeker Experience team. We're responsible for creating helpful resources and events like this Jobcast for our users, like you. So Emilie, the path to promotion is often pretty daunting. Where should someone start?
Great question, Brandy. And I'm so excited to walk us through answering that and so much more today. Honestly, this conversation is such an important one to carve out time for, like everyone tuning in today has, at a variety of pivot points in your career. So if you're here because you've been feeling a little bit stuck and not sure how to get to that next level, or you feel pigeonholed because you are really getting opportunities to do what you've already learned to do and want to do something a little bit different or get into that first leadership role or management role, you're facing a common conundrum that so many of my clients, podcast listeners, and book readers often tell me they're running up against. So that's really what we're going to break down today. And I can't wait to answer your questions in real time towards the end of our talk today. I recommend the best place to get started when it comes to thinking about your promotion and your pathway to promotion is really answering why you're interested in a promotion. Because there's lots of different reasons folks are looking for that next step in their career. Number one that comes to mind that I think is relevant for so many of us is higher pay. I do want to clarify, however, that you can often negotiate a raise without a promotion. So don't think that the only way you're going to be able to increase your pay is to fundamentally change your job description and your role and your responsibilities at work. What we're focusing on here today is that promotion navigation. So things that result in a fundamental shift in your role and responsibilities, oftentimes with higher pay, but not always. So keep in mind, we have tons of resources available, I'm sure, right here on Indeed in the Jobcast archive, but also on bossedup.com that have detailed step-by-step instructions on how to negotiate a raise, whether or not you're negotiating a promotion. Now, if you're here because you're looking for variety, growth, bigger impact, more power and influence, those are all really great reasons to pursue a promotion. That oftentimes is what climbing that hierarchy at work can look like. I would caution you against, however, simply seeking out promotions or that next step in your career because what you're really craving is prestige, or you feel like it's just time. You feel behind when comparing yourself to your peers somehow, or you simply want to feel a sense of progress in your careers. Because sometimes, honestly, that pursuit of progress and the feeling of progress, which is an innate need that we all have as human beings, can be a little misguided. It can cause folks, and these are clients I've worked with who have found themselves going from being a nurse to a nurse manager and really miss nursing and really dislike managing nurses. So I want to caution you against pursuing a promotion for the sake of progress alone, because promotions, at least in the terms that we're really going to be focusing on here today, often come with a fundamental shift towards leadership or management that can take you away from more of the technical frontline aspects of your work. So if you love your job, but you're craving progress, perhaps it's an opportunity to look at opportunities outside of work to feel that sensation of forward momentum. What we're really going to do is figure out today how to persuasively make that case, beginning with positioning yourself as a leader on the rise. Being really good at your job, whether you're a writer, a teacher, a nurse, a scientist, a researcher, whatever it might be, does not necessarily position you for a promotion. In fact, some managers might say, you're too good to be lost to management and leadership. We need you in this technical role that you're really mastering. So keep in mind, being good at your job is not the same thing as positioning yourself as a leader. So what does this process actually look like? First, we have to acknowledge the importance that executive presence plays, right? Executive presence can be a very wishy-washy term. For everyone who uses this term, everyone has a different definition out there. It's a very tricky, sort of wishy-washy quality. But at the end of the day, here's what it actually boils down to, regardless of the definitions that are out there. When someone is thinking about promoting you into a position of management or leadership, they're often asking themselves this question: if she is given a promotion, if she is given the opportunity to lead a project, a team, a department, will others follow? If she or he is given an opportunity to lead, will other people be inspired to follow suit? The answer has to be yes, to really cultivate confidence in your readiness for that next level. And those often who are described as having executive presence are seen as having gravitas, showing confidence, staying poised under pressure, demonstrating decisiveness, all of those leadership characteristics that can be a little bit hard to pin down because, again, they are so different than being good at your job. It's not enough to be good at what you do. We have to project leadership capacity. Even before we've been given permission to lead, we need to demonstrate that we are ready to lead.
She raises brows.
That's really tricky, especially for women and people of color. We have historically been conditioned to perfect, perform, and please everyone around us, right? We've been taught to just follow the rules, color within the lines, be darn good at what we do, and not necessarily get too big for our britches. And this may be part of the reason why there's such a massive gender leadership gap right from the get-go. It's not like this just happens when we get to the highest echelons of our company's cultures, right? This isn't just the C-suite. In fact, research from McKinsey and Lean In found that for every 100 men who were promoted into their first ever management role, only 72 women are given the same opportunity. And as per usual, unfortunately, the numbers are even worse for women of color. So what does this mean? It means that the gender leadership gap is immediately apparent right from that first management level promotion. And this can be really tricky because this only compounds over time, right? Those men in management then are given opportunities and more opportunities that those women who never got the first shot are even offered. Now, interestingly, a lot of research also shows men are more likely to be promoted based on potential alone, things like executive presence, showing that they have potential to lead, whereas women are more often promoted based on proven past performance. That is very tricky, of course, when you aren't given a chance to show that you can lead. How are you supposed to have a track record of leadership to show that you're ready for leadership? It's a total catch-22. Now, if we were able to close this gap from the get-go and women were promoted at equal rates to men in that first management level promotion, in the next 5 years, we'd see 1 million more women in management across corporate America. So clearly, there are a lot of folks out there who are looking for that next step, who are running not only into personal barriers, but also systemic ones. And I think it's just really important to acknowledge the systemic forces at play when we're navigating these kinds of transitions in our own careers. No, I'm not sharing this to be a downer, right? We got to play the cards we've been dealt while we change the game. And so I'm going to focus on self-advocacy today based on my background, which is helping women and folks of color really advocate for themselves to get to that next level. One of the best ways we can begin to do this is to really understand the differences between what makes a great manager and what makes for a great leader. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a great manager, but if you're a manager of projects or tasks and you're really excellent at getting your job done well, that doesn't translate to being seen as a leader who's ready for that first promotion into management or leadership. So some of the key characteristics that are associated with managers are managers administer tasks, right? They administer programs, they administer projects, whereas leaders innovate. Leaders look at the playbook, leaders look at the operating procedure and say, is this right? Can this be done better? How can we evolve to be future focused, to be ready for the changing environment in our marketplace? Whereas managers are focused on tasks, and y'all know if I'm talking to you, if you're the kind of person who's constantly checking things off the to-do list and prides themselves on always getting through that inbox or that to-do list every week, that can be really good for management, but it doesn't always translate to leadership. Leaders might not be super on top of their to-do list. Leaders, instead of focusing on tasks, are more likely to be focused on people, on relationships, on building high-functioning teams, on investing in the relationships that are going to help us get to the next level. Again, some of us might be thinking, yeah, I have a boss like that who never gets their stuff done, but they might be focused on the people work, on the team development work, on the relationship nurturing that is so key and so important for leaders to do. Whereas managers have subordinates that they might delegate to, leaders have followers. That's why when a great leader leaves a company, oftentimes you see a whole bunch of employees follow them out. Leadership inspires trust. True leaders inspire faith and inspire a following that goes deeper than management structure alone.
Waves finger.
And finally, whereas managers are focused on crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and getting things done right, leaders are less focused on the detail, on the day-to-day, and more focused on the big picture. Are we doing the right thing here? Or do we need to reevaluate? Now, again, there's nothing wrong with being a great manager. We need great managers. But to be positioning yourself as a leader, we need to really shift our mindset away from perfecting, performing, and pleasing, and more towards innovation and vision, right? So clarifying and communicating your vision for the next step in your career is actually an act of leadership, and you're demonstrating your ability to be a visionary leader. But what the heck does that even mean, right? What is a leadership vision? I really enjoy this definition from the Harvard Business Review that says a leadership vision is a compelling image of an achievable future. A compelling, I would argue, it should be a visceral image, right? A painting of a picture that you can really see. You can almost feel it. You can get excited about it because it's just around the corner, right? You've got to paint a clear picture of what it is that you want, what it is that you see on the horizon. And truthfully, when presenting your leadership vision, it often needs to be rooted in the past, take stock of today's realities, right? Address the present day realities and constraints that you might be working with, and look towards the future. So a good leadership vision should be grounded in the past, acknowledge the present realities, and inspire an exciting vision for the future. Let me break this down with a few examples. Here's what a leadership vision might sound like when you bring this idea to your boss. You might say something like this: during this crisis, I'd like to see our department invest in cultivating more emotional intelligence and create more psychological safety. Our focus on KPIs, or key performance indicators, are important, but I worry that our team is at risk of burnout. Here are some best practices I've been reading about that I'd love to implement for our weekly meetings.
I want to point out how well this uses a technique that you covered in the assertive communication jobcast, Emilie, and that's framing your statement first with intent, then content, so that the why is clear before someone has the chance to pass judgment on the what. It's a simple method for making a strong message without coming across as overbearing, especially if you haven't been promoted to that leadership position yet.
Totally. Definitely check out that job cast because it's one of our favorites. And being assertive, being a leader requires being assertive. And that is tricky, especially if you've been conditioning others around you to not expect assertiveness from you, right? If this is totally new behavior, of course you might ruffle a few feathers when you bring this up at first. So imagine if I said, I don't think our focus on KPIs makes sense. Our team's about to burn out. Right? Imagine if you open with that, that would be very accusational and it could go off a little worse than if you said, I'd really like to see our team cultivate more emotional safety or emotional intelligence and psychological safety, right? Leading with your intention before you get to your assertive proposal can be really, really key. And that's something we address in detail in that additional job cast on assertive communication. Let's look at a couple more examples, okay? Here's an example from a marketing perspective. I might say to my boss, the latest marketing trends are focused on incorporating an SMS central strategy, aka text messaging, over email and social media alone. I know funds are tight and we've historically prioritized social media ad spends, but I propose that we either reallocate some of that budget towards a new hire or pivot Stacy's role to focus on mobile strategy at least 25% of her time. What I like about this example is that you're saying, here's the trend on the horizon. Here's the future of marketing. So it's future focused. Then you're saying, I'm acknowledging the realities of our present day constraints. We don't have money to throw at this. And I know we've historically done this, but here's why I think we should make this shift, right? So you're being clear about your leadership vision. Let me reiterate here that you do not need explicit authority to start acting like a leader, right? I remember being a very rambunctious intern at one point in my career. I graduated at the height of the Great Recession. I was working for a political digital strategy firm. I had just graduated with my political science degree in hand and wanted to save the world by day and really advocate for my core beliefs all day, every day, right? And I would propose ideas like this. I would be invited to pitch meetings, and all the other interns in the office were like, head down, eyes downward. And when I stuck my head out or stuck my neck out, it certainly came with risks. The risks of being seen as rambunctious or overly eager or too ambitious. But I will take those risks every day over the risk of keeping my ideas to myself and watching someone else propose what I was going to say, or watching someone else get credit for an idea that I quietly was talking about with the other interns, right? Being a leader sometimes means acting like a leader before you've been given the promotion that you want. So I encourage you to have courage in audaciously sharing a leadership vision like this. The last example I want to share with you has to do with current events, something that every company and organization is dealing with, especially this week, right? So here's a way I might address how my organization can do better when it comes to social justice. I might say the current events around racial justice are impossible to ignore, and we're missing an opportunity here to live up to our founding motto of equality above all. Would the board be open to us producing a video series highlighting our customers who are leaders in community activism? Again, this is proposed in the form of a question, but sometimes a question can be a very assertive way of sharing a vision. And what I especially like about this is you're tying the present day reality to your organization's history and your core values. So again, try to ground your leadership vision in the past, present, and future. That is what leading really looks like and sounds like. And listen, you're not going to get a green light all the time. You're not going to get a round of applause for every idea you pitch. But part of positioning yourself as a leader means being willing to stick your neck out and say, here's what I see coming down the pipeline, coming down in the future trends that are going to impact our company, our team, our organization. Leaders have their eye on the horizon and are future focused, thinking about innovation, even before they've been asked to do so. So I encourage you to embrace that future focus and be willing to make your voice heard. Now, I have to go back to how this manifests in unique ways across the gender spectrum, because this is especially interesting when you look at the research around women leaders and vision. There's a really fascinating study that was done where they did 360-degree reviews, meaning they surveyed with self-evaluations. They had these women managers' bosses evaluate them, peers evaluate them, and direct reports evaluate them. And what they found is that women leaders were rated higher on every single leadership characteristic compared to their male counterparts, except for one. One key characteristic that women leaders were seen as lacking in is envisioning, which is what we've been talking about this whole time. The ability to recognize new opportunities and trends in the environment, meaning your whole marketplace, whatever industry you're in, and develop a new strategic direction for the enterprise. So if we think that leadership vision is important, and for some reason it's challenging or difficult for women leaders to demonstrate their leadership vision, there are a few different theories that explain why this might be happening. And this is what the researchers found. Theory one is that women are totally visionary, but just in a different way that doesn't get as much visibility and credit. A lot of women leaders share credit and they say, no, this wasn't my idea. This was my team's idea. And this was the hard work of so many departments that came together on this. And in an effort to be a small d democratic or diplomatic leader who, isn't in it for the spotlight necessarily, she sometimes isn't seen as having vision. She's not seen as having credit for the great ideas that she might be a part of leading. Theory number two is that women leaders are less likely to just stick their neck out and shoot from the hip and pitch ideas that are half-baked, because they know that women's mistakes are dramatized in a way that's much more severe than the average male leader's mistakes. It's actually known in the research as the glass cliff, related to, but different from the glass ceiling. Women leaders are more likely to be given the boot when they make one mistake compared to male leaders who are often given opportunities to redeem themselves. There's some interesting research on that if you want to look into it further. The moral of the story here is that perhaps women leaders are less willing to spitball ideas and to, throw out concepts that are not fully thought through, because they really want to have the facts, have the research done, be fully prepared before pitching an idea. And theory number three is that a lot of the women in this study just didn't think it mattered that much to be visionary. They're like, I'm not interested in being Steve Jobs or Richard Branson or being in the spotlight. I don't need the Britney mic. I don't need the pitch meetings. I don't need to be the one in our commercials. It's really not about me. I am more focused on how I can best serve my team. And that is what it matters to these women leaders who were surveyed. Listen, there's no right or wrong way to view this data. However, it is important to acknowledge that to get to that promotion, to get to that opportunity, being seen as visionary is helpful. So if you are someone who identifies as a woman or someone who struggles for whatever reason with being visionary, I want you to give yourself permission to be audacious here, because cultivating and communicating vision requires giving yourself permission to color outside the lines a little bit. It means reading the newspaper and bringing ideas into work from outside of your company. Instead of keeping the blinders on and staying so focused on getting things done right, we need to pick our heads off the desk and say, well, how are they doing it over there? Maybe we should be asking ourselves if our company can be doing this better. And that is a very audacious idea to put forth, but that is what gets us seen as the leaders that we absolutely are. So I want to encourage you if you feel like you've been perfecting, performing, and pleasing everyone around you, to push yourself, to be audacious and give yourself permission to think outside the box.
Squints eyes.
Now, that being said, it's a very amorphous challenge that I've just given to you, right? You're like, what does that mean? How do I even begin? So as someone who enjoys a little bit of structure in my own life, I thought it might be helpful to give you a structure within which you can really begin to cultivate more of a vision or strategic plan. Who here has done a SWOT analysis ever? I'd be curious to see if you've ever done one of these before, because a SWOT analysis is just a helpful strategic planning tool that you can use to think about your department, to think about your organization, or just to think about your career in a strategic and analytical way. So let me walk you through what this is. And you honestly just need a pen and paper to get started. You can, write 2 little lines, make a little grid for yourself and just start scribbling down bullet pointed notes to engage in this on your own. So on the top left quadrant, the S in SWOT, we want you to focus on strengths. What is it that you already do well? If you're focusing on this as it relates to your career, I want you to think internally, what are my gifts? What am I already good at? If you want to focus on this as it relates to your department, your team, your organization, I want you to think, okay, what does your organization, department, or team already have going for it? The top 2 boxes here, focus internally on things you have direct control over. So if we look over at weaknesses, the W in SWOT, that's what we need to improve upon. Those are the skills gaps that you might need to close if you're a job seeker thinking about your career. Or if you're looking at your team, your department, or your company, what are your biggest internal weaknesses? What are you lacking in terms of things that your team needs to be successful? So as you can see at the top, the left side of this grid is helpful, the right side is harmful, things to watch out for. The bottom 2 quadrants are focused on externalities, so things outside of your direct control, perhaps trends in the marketplace, in your industry, or in the economy overall. So externally, what are opportunities that you can take advantage of? If you're looking at this from a career perspective, what are the economic trends that you can use to cultivate your career, to take your career to the next level? As a team, what are trends that impact your department? What are things that are happening? What kinds of things are happening within your organization that might set up your team to be successful? And then, of course, the final one here is threats. What are external trends that could be really bad for your career or your team? What threats do you need to monitor, to watch out for, to make sure you keep an eye on these things in case they come crashing down and really impact your team, your department, or your career? To give you an example of this, I did a SWOT analysis. My company, Bossed Up, is a small personal and professional development company. We're based here in Denver, Colorado. We've got a team of 4 full-time employees who have a strength going for us, which is we are motivated, hardworking, and passionate. I think my biggest strength as a company is the incredible team that we have working for us here at Bossed Up, 2 of whom are on the line with us here today, dropping lots of helpful links. So thanks, Kirby and Ellie, for being here today. I truly think Bossed Up's biggest strength is the people that we have working for our team. When it comes to weaknesses, however, I was recently chatting with our team in our most recent strategic meeting and listening to their feedback in our one-on-one reviews. And everybody said, even though we're a small team, as our team has recently grown and expanded, as we just brought on our 4th employee back in January, we were struggling a little bit with cross-departmental communication and collaboration because everyone is so good at managing their workflow. It was confusing how and when and how best we could collaborate. So that was an internal weakness that we could work on. Notice the strengths and weaknesses have to be focused inward on things you have control over. Now, for the bottom, the opportunities and threats, we're focused on things that are happening outside of our organization that impact us. So O, for our opportunities, is that one of the opportunities that impacts our business is the fact that there are a lot of dissatisfied folks who are looking for their next job or promotion right now. A lot of us are coming out of a very tumultuous year, navigating a global pandemic, which is, knock on wood, on its way out. And, as we start thinking a little bit less in a survival scarcity mindset and start thinking about, okay, how can I actually move forward and move on with my life after a very challenging year? A lot of folks are coming to bossedup.org to get resources to help advocate for proactive progress in their career. And that's an opportunity for us, just like it is for Indeed. When it comes to threats, however, one of the biggest external threats that we're already seeing impact our little business is the fact that a lot of our corporate partners who traditionally bring me in for speaking events or bring us in to run accelerator programs for the women leaders within their organizations globally, their budgets for personal and professional development funds have been slashed due to the economic result of the pandemic. Obviously, this isn't true in every industry, but it is true in a lot of industries. So I hope this example gives you some structural ways to start thinking big picture. And let me tell you, the women leaders who I work with at Bossed Up, when we walk through these kinds of trainings about vision and strategic planning, a lot of them think, well, shoot, I've never thought about doing this before because I'm so busy just getting my work done. And I say to them, you're right. Getting your work done is a good way to make you an invaluable employee, someone who they don't want to lose because you're getting things done as you should.
Leans in.
But if you are looking to change your reputation, to be seen as a leader on the rise, to be given those promotional opportunities to get into management or leadership, take it upon yourself to do this kind of work anyway. And my clients in our Level Up Leadership Accelerator, recently, a couple of them posted in our internal online community network saying, I brought all of this to my boss. I showed him what I did. And he was like, what do I need to take off your plate so that you can do more of this and make this a priority? Because I really see the leadership vision that you're bringing to the table here. And I think this is so important. I want you to focus more on this. So just know, that's an ideal outcome. It's not always the result that everybody gets, but know that sometimes your boss and your managers are just waiting for you to offer leadership vision up and capitalize on it, because that is above and beyond behavior that gets often noticed in a really positive way. I will caution you that the one kind of boss who doesn't appreciate this is the micromanager who is extremely insecure about their own value to the company and who is more likely to see your leadership as a threat to their own. If you work for one of those folks, perhaps a job seeker webinar or Jobcast is right for you, because that is a tricky situation to be in. But trust me, between Indeed and Bossed Up, we got you covered. We will find the avenue that you need to get into your leadership position that you really want. So the final component here, just to keep it real with y'all, right? The final component of our workshop today is I really want to leave you with some persuasive communication strategies. As I mentioned earlier, I started my career before launching Bossed Up back in 2013. I actually started my career in campaigns and elections as a political operative, and it was my job to be persuasive. Right? What is a campaign if not a pitch, an advertisement, an opportunity to make your case for your promotion into public office, right? To paint a clear picture of the leadership vision that you would bring to the table. So here are some key lessons I still take with me from my time in campaigns and elections and politics, which turned out not to be for me full time because that really burnt me out pretty quickly. But I did learn some really important lessons about persuasive communication. First and foremost, make sure the timing is right. Sometimes it's not about you or your executive presence or your performance or even your boss or your leadership or your management. Sometimes it's just about the environment and the timing and the situation that you're running up against. For example, a friend of mine is just recently navigated a corporate merger. Their company was acquired by a much larger one. And I talked to her yesterday about the pathway to promotion for her, because she is very busy navigating a few different negotiations. First, she had to sell a film to her company. She works in production in the TV world. And that was a very daunting negotiation. And then she had to tell them, oh, by the way, I'm 6 months pregnant, so I'm going to be out on maternity leave soon. And that was a pretty daunting negotiation, because historically her company didn't have any paid parental leave. But now that they've been acquired, the new company actually does offer paid parental leave. So she had to make sure she was eligible for all of that before she brought it up. And then when she told them about her pregnancy, everyone freaked out. Everyone said, but you're the most valuable editor we have on staff. How are we going to survive without you? Our other editors, who, by the way, get paid the same amount of money as she does, they just can't do what you do. And she said, well, this is an opportunity for us to grow our team, to train and develop the people who we have working for us, to get them up to speed. And I said, Marcia, based on what I'm hearing, you should ask for a raise and a promotion, and you should be managing the other editors on your team. Go for that senior editor title. And she said, yeah, but I'm about to leave on maternity leave, and I don't know if I can negotiate that now. If I was going to, I have to do it back in March when the merger and acquisition went through. And I said, dang, that's a real missed opportunity, because had you made your case for a promotion back then, you would be having a very different conversation right now. And I told her about another client of mine, and I promise I'll keep this story quick. I told her about another client of mine who we'll call Allie, who worked in food grocery logistics. And if you can imagine, of all the businesses that did well last year, grocery food related businesses were certainly one of them. And she was going to make a really solid case. She worked with us in our Level Up Leadership Accelerator. And through our coaching together, she was really ready to pitch her promotion to her boss, but she was about to go on maternity leave too. And so she was actually going to miss the annual review period that was coming up in her company. So I said, okay, we can figure this out. Let's get a jump on it. So she did her self-evaluation. She wrote a memo. She had a discussion with her boss and sent him the memo saying, here are all the ways I've brought value to the company in the past 2 years. Here are all the reasons that I deserve a promotion and a pay bump. And I'm thrilled to report that just the other week or so, I got an email from her saying, Emilie, I just got back from maternity leave. And of course, she shared some cute baby photos. And she said, I just got back from maternity leave, and 3 days into being back in the office, I got the title bump that I asked for and the 20% raise. So basically, I got exactly what we had negotiated for, because while she was out on mat leave, her boss had everything he needed to make her case for her. So I was telling Marcia this, saying, you got to do the same thing, but we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted. It's still very much to be determined. The moral of the story here is, if you have a natural review horizon timeline to think about, capitalize on it, right? If there's a fresh start around the July budget renewal period, get a jump on it now.
Ensure timing.
If you just missed your annual review period, because it happens every January, start having conversations about how you can set yourself up for success next January. Or another form of a fresh start might be just finishing a huge project that went super duper well, or having the president of your company shout out your team for doing something extraordinarily well. Those moments are to be capitalized on. Now, the second piece of advice when it comes to timing is to give your boss a little bit of a heads up. If you're going to ask for a raise, try to give them some sense of what's coming. So I'd like to I recommend my clients send an email to their boss or partners or whoever they're negotiating with to say, hey, it's been a wonderful 2 years of growth here. I'm so proud of all the work we've done together. I'd love to talk with you about my future at the company. Do you have time Friday afternoon to chat? And so you're asking to ask, you're signaling to them, I'm thinking about my future. It doesn't have to be super obvious, like, hey, I want to ask for a raise and promotion, but give a little bit of context. Tell them what you've been thinking about and that you'd like to talk with them. That way, your boss or board or partners or whomever is more likely to be prepared. I want you to really think about your brag book, or what Indeed and Brandy here like to call your smile file. Your brag book or your smile file is a place where you keep track of all of your big wins. So whenever a client sends you an email saying, thank you so much for your hard work on this, or whenever you get a positive review, take a picture of it, take a screenshot of it, put that email in a special file where you can go back to hype yourself up and remind yourself of all the reasons why you are great at your job. And if you're having trouble developing your own brag book, I always tell my clients to look back on your performance in the past year and compare your performance to the least performing or the least comparable person who could possibly be doing your job. If there is someone in your role who's doing not that great a job, like an editor who can't do what you do, compare yourself to them. What makes you extraordinary? What makes you better? Is it being reliable, communicative, friendly, supportive? Sometimes we take our own strengths for granted until we compare ourselves to someone who we're like, oh yeah, I would do a better job than them any day. So that could be helpful for just creating a little comparison. But furthermore, if you're still struggling to come up with why you're great, enlist the help of someone who loves you. Ask someone who is a champion of you, whether they're a partner, a loved one, a friend, or just a colleague or coworker who could remind you why you're so great. Now, it doesn't matter if you're so great if you don't frame your bragability as an asset to the team. As I like to say, it's not about you and your dream, it's about the team. So think about when you're positioning yourself for a promotion, keep in mind that your boss doesn't necessarily want to lose you, right? Hiring another person is hard. Finding another person to replace you is tricky. So you got to paint a picture as to how you could add even more value in that senior editor role as opposed to the editor role. Why would it be an asset to the entire organization to give you a promotion? You got to find the win, win, win. How is this a win for you, a win for your boss, and a win for the overall organization? So this is a great time to remind them of all the ways that you're better than the average person in your role. And you can also play a little bit of heaven and a little bit of hell. Here's what I mean by that. This is a storytelling device, but I often find that the most compelling stories play on our heartstrings, what we're all hoping for, what we all wish for and hope for and dream for. And sometimes they also play on our deepest fears and insecurities. What do we want to avoid? What do we want to make sure does not happen? So think about this from your boss's perspective. What is their biggest fear? And how does promoting you keep that from happening? And then what are their biggest hopes? How does promoting you help make that happen? So don't forget, you can play into their hopes and their fears. And it's not malicious. It's saying, listen, you might say, I know that budgets are tight right now, but I also know that bringing in an outside consultant to take the lead on our marketing initiatives is going to be much more expensive than putting me in to a promoted marketing manager role where I'm already familiar with our team and our systems. I can get us to that 21st century marketing strategy that we want to be at. I'm clear on your vision and I'm here and ready to make it happen for a raise. Wink, wink, right? So when you're asking for more, I want you to make sure you're telling them why you're worth it, right? Based on my proven track record, based on my willingness to step up and lead, based on my familiarity with our organization, here's what I'm asking for. Here's a winning formula that I like to recommend for all of my negotiators to keep in mind. Always, always, always open with gratitude and excitement. Thanks so much for taking time to meet with me. Then remind them of your strengths, everything that you bring to the table. That's where you refer to your smile file or your brag book. Then be really clear, just like my client Allie was, about what she wants, her title bump, her promotion, her management role, her 20% raise. And finally, tie it back to the win-win-win. How is this good for all of us? How does this benefit everybody? And then I always recommend closing, because this is not a soliloquy, right? This is a conversation. You're just starting the conversation. So close it with an open-ended question, like, what do you think about that? Here's an example of putting this all together. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat. As you know, I've grown so much here in the past 2 years, especially as it relates to my technical sales abilities, strategic marketing leadership, and team management. Looking ahead to my professional future, I'd love to be formally promoted to sales and marketing director from manager, as I'm ready to bring more strategic influence to our team. With this new level of responsibility, I can take more off your plate, create room for my direct reports to grow, and focus on our new strategic direction. Is that something you'd be open to? Now, please do not script this out and write a memo and try to negotiate via email. Do this in a live conversation. It's not about getting every word perfect. It's about getting the overall structure down, practicing it out loud. You have not practiced your negotiation until you practice out loud. And then delivering authentically, right? Deliver this authentically and be ready to hear what they think. Now, when you pitch this kind of a thing, when you pitch a promotion, you got to be ready for all kinds of responses. In fact, you might get a whole bunch of feedback about how you're actually not performing as well as you thought you were. Or you might get a whole bunch of feedback about how actually there's about to be a huge round of layoffs that you didn't know about. Or actually, there's about to be a huge merger that you had no idea was coming down the pipe. Whatever the feedback is that you receive, if what you're hearing mainly is a no, I want you to use that feedback as fuel. It's truly an opportunity to say, okay, so what I'm hearing from you is you're concerned about my project management skills. And if I demonstrate that my project management skills have improved, can we revisit this conversation in 3 months? Therefore, what you've essentially gotten from them is an if-then promise. If this happens, then promotion happens. I've seen people do this truly successfully when they've gotten pushback around budget. Oh, we just don't have the budget for promotion right now because we've had a tough fiscal year. And my clients will say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is that we've had a tough fiscal year, so this promotion's not possible now. If our Q4 reports are up and our fiscal year improves, can we revisit this conversation? And then 3 months or 6 months or 9 months later, they go back and say, here's the receipt, right? Here's the conversation we had. Here's my email that followed up saying, here's what you told me. Let's talk negotiation again because our fiscal year is doing much better. So that can be helpful. Brandy?
Yeah, I love that you can come out of that conversation with action items rather than just a hard no that you don't really know what to do with.
Exactly. And that requires resilience. Because I mean, everybody, it's our human nature when we hear no to just shut down and be like, okay, never mind. I regret what I asked for. And just like, roll it back and try to rewind. And it's so humiliating sometimes, but you've got to keep in mind, it's not about you. It's not about perfection. It's not about performance. It's really an opportunity for active listening. So if you can kind of check your ego for a minute and lean into the discomfort that is a no, and really try to get curious instead of furious, you're much more likely to be successful. Last thing I want you to keep in mind about this is, just like my client, Allie, you don't have to do this alone, right? You can enlist your boss as an ally in making the case for your promotion. But guess what? Most of our bosses don't like to negotiate either. So we got to make this easy for them. We got to equip them to advocate on your behalf. Maybe it's about sending that memo saying, here's what we discussed today. Here's all the reasons I should get a promotion. Maybe it's asking them about their timeline, finding out what their process is. Who do they have to deal with? Who do they have to negotiate? And then seeing them as your team member who you can co-create a negotiation strategy with. Obviously, this hinges on having a pretty good relationship with your boss already, which I know is not available to everybody. But remember, you're not just limited to your boss. Sometimes it's peers, it's colleagues, it's other leaders within the company, mentors, sponsors who you can enlist for this kind of support as well. This process doesn't happen overnight. It takes clients who are doing all of the right things, who are working with me to do all of the right things, often minimum 3 months, if not 6 months or more, to make these kinds of transitions happen. I've got a client who is a federal lobbyist for a huge hospital system in Boston. She's the only one who goes to Congress to lobby on behalf of this hospital. And she's been doing this job extremely well for over 6 years without a raise or promotion. And after working with us in our Level Up Leadership Accelerator, she made a really strong case for why she should get a new team member, right? A direct report, a promotion, and a raise to grow her department's influence right around the same time that there was going to be a president's switch. So there was going to be turnover in the C-suite, in the president's office. That doesn't happen very often for a hospital. It doesn't get a new president very often. But she was able to connect her promotion to the new president coming into office. And guess what? That stuff takes time. So even if you play all your cards right, even if you do this super strategically, stay persistent and stay vigilant. If you start to hear promises with no action, month after month after month, with no real end in sight when you're not going to be paid lip service, if you feel like you're just getting empty promises with no follow through month after month, then it's time to start thinking, what are my alternatives? Because sometimes there's a reason why so many people come to Indeed and Bossed Up for job search advice. Sometimes the fastest pathway to a promotion is looking outside the organization. But if you really believe in where you're at and you want to continue to contribute to your team, to your organization, know that this takes time, but it is so worth the advocacy. No one can advocate on your behalf better than you can. So keep these takeaways in mind. And I'm so excited to take your questions now. I know we're just about time. If it's not obvious, I'm very passionate about this subject. Regardless of your gender and your industry, this can be done. And I encourage you to make the most of our time together to really hit the ground running and advocate for the raise or promotion that you want.
So let's take a look at some of the top questions that came in. And if we don't get to your question, post it as a comment on the YouTube video and we'll try and answer it there instead. So top question here, or two questions that I'm kind of going to combine because they were both the top two. How do you navigate the false promotions? For example, getting extra work and responsibility that usually comes with promotion, but without the extra money. And similarly, how would you approach advocating for oneself when you're already doing the role, but without the title and, proving that you deserve that pay bump?
This is so frustrating and wildly common. So I'm really glad to see that this is coming up. At the very start of our workshop today, I talked about the retroactive promotion. And that's really what this is. As a result of scope creep, right? Scope creep is when your job description expands without any formal promotion or raise. That whether we call it false promotion or what have you, the initial negotiation has to be one that's framed around a retroactive or corrective promotion. And so oftentimes when I work with women in male-dominated industries, this looks like closing an unconsciously perpetuated gender wage gap. When you're negotiating a promotion that should have been done a year ago, this is closing a promotion gap. And we have to frame it that way. So here's the bad news. The bad news is your totally rightful resentment will not help you. What I'm saying here is that if you're angry, if you're a little ticked off, if you feel indignant about this, if you feel justifiably frustrated or taken advantage of, you have every right to feel those feelings. And you have to put those feelings in a little box and throw it to the back of your recesses of your unconscious for this conversation, because any sign of righteous indignation is going to backfire in this conversation. I had to give this advice to a client of mine recently. I was like, oh, you sound really frustrated by this. That's fair. And we got to check that. We got to lock that up. Okay. Because that is not going to help your case here. So then when you go in for this conversation, to go back a few slides here, we're going to do exactly the same thing. But when we ask for a conversation, where is that? When you ask to ask, the context you're going to give is going to be slightly different. Instead of, I've been thinking about my future, you might say, as you've seen, my role and responsibilities have expanded greatly in the last 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever. I'm so proud of the work we've done together, and I'd love to talk about my role and future at the organization here. So you're going to allude to the scope creep or the expansion of your duties as you give that context to set up this conversation. Then when you give this winning formula, when you talk about your strengths, I want you to paint a picture instead of forward facing, like a leadership vision. I want you to look backwards and say, I was happy to take the lead on this. I was glad to expand my responsibilities in this department. And then you're going to ask for what you're going to ask for, whether it's a raise, promotion, pay bump, title change, what have you. Now, if you know that there's someone out there in the company who had the same role expansion happen and they were given X dollars more, I don't recommend you use them by name, but another client of mine found out that an editor who happened to be a man was given a senior editor promotion and was offered $10,000 more. And when she went in to negotiate for her senior editor promotion, guess what? They offered her $5,000 more. That's interesting, because she knew that senior editor over here was making $10,000 more. And what she said when negotiating was, I think $10,000 would be more equitable. And that was a really smart use of a key word there. If you have a benchmark in the form of another person in that position who's been promoted, who you're asking to just be made equal to that person, use the word equitable to say, I think a 20% raise and title promotion would be most equitable. That can be a really helpful keyword to trigger an association with their status. Again, you painting your picture of yourself as a victim doesn't help. I hate to force you to sort of mask that, but it's just strategic advice. So regardless, again, of gender, if you've been given a false promotion, it's time to explicitly ask for that promotion and just make it a retroactive, corrective promotion. This happens way too much. So I hope you can act on all of this advice and make it happen, because I'm frustrated on your behalf, quite frankly.
Yeah. And we actually talk about this in one of the past Jobcasts, Crafting Your Career, about how it can be a first step towards a real promotion, or if you're trying to create a new role that doesn't already exist, that you can take on these responsibilities as an opportunity to prove yourself, and then use that, like you said, retroactively say, okay, I've been doing these responsibilities for 3 months now, proving myself. Now I'd like to have the title and raise that go along with that, since I've shown the value that can be added here. So I think that it's a really nice way to, position it in your own mind as well, that this was just you proving yourself, and now you get that promotion.
I hear you, and I'm torn about that, right? Because I think we sometimes are too willing to go along and get along, right? And I'm not saying anyone should stamp their feet and say, no, I'm not going to add any responsibilities to my plate. That's not really being a team player, right? But I think people get taken advantage of with this whole team player narrative. So I think there's a balance to be struck. I think 3 months is the key word there, right? 3 months, sure. I think I would actually accept new responsibilities from my boss with the understanding we'd have a review coming up. Let's review my role and talk about my expanded responsibilities. I'd be happy to take this on. Can we, have a review? Some organizations host a review once a year. That is whack as far as I'm concerned, right? I have quarterly reviews with my staff. And so, make sure you're covering your bases, because guess what? If you just say, sure, people are going to continue piling onto your plate until they hear something else. And more often than not, that means women and folks of color. And that's not cool. So I think we have to find the right balance, and it's really up to each of us to be our own best advocate to assert our boundaries.
Absolutely. The next question here is, how do you get around office politics to get a promotion? I found it's much more important how good you are personally with the business owner or boss who determines who will progress.
Yeah. I mean, couple key things to keep in mind. Power map your workplace. Figure out whose opinions matter and whose don't. And I'm not saying any human being matters more than anyone else, but sometimes at work, this person's perspective of what you're doing matters a whole hell of a lot more. I made this mistake early on in my career. I was the youngest state director in the nation, and I was focused on my volunteers. I was focused on my state. I was focused on my turf, my work, my political relationships as I was serving on behalf of a federal nationwide organization. And guess what? When layoffs came around, no one in HQ in Washington, D.C. knew who the hell I was or what the hell I was doing because I was so focused on staying in my state. And I had not nurtured the relationships with the people who are in the most positions of power within my structure. The people who were doing a worse job, as far as I was concerned, but who had nurtured relationships with HQ stayed while the rest of us got fired or got laid off. And so, yeah, power map your workplace, figure out who has the most influence. Sometimes influence and power are not directly correlated with title and authority. So keep that in mind. And then make relationship development part of your strategy. It is not just about being good at your job. That's not good enough. And while that should be good enough, we don't live in a perfect meritocracy. We don't live in a world where merit equals success or merit and work, hard work alone equals promotion. So the answer to how you overcome the politics is you get into it. You play into it because it can't be avoided. Sorry, hate to break it to you, but we all need to roll up our sleeves and be willing to play ball because politics is just another word for relationships and people promote people that they believe in.
Yeah. And a big keyword on this topic is visibility, right? So those relationships, but also making sure that the hard work that you're doing is shown to those people who have influence, and making sure that, whether you're just sharing it out through email or in your meetings with them, sometimes this can be really hard for people. I know I struggle with this myself because you're like, oh, I don't want to brag about this, or I don't want to come across as arrogant about it. But you want to make sure that what you're doing and spending your time on is getting seen by those people with power.
I think sometimes we think that there are workhorses and show horses and that there are just two kinds of workers.
Shakes head.
We got to be both. We got to be doing both. And for the first part of my career, I thought working like doggedly alone would do the trick, and it doesn't. So don't think of it as showing off. Think of it as advocating for yourself, making sure you're getting credit where credit is due. And it's hard for women, especially. That's why we have programs like Speak Up to help women be assertive about that. But it is not easy for anybody, especially my introverted friends. I'm if it's not obvious, I'm very extroverted. And I think there is a totally different set of advice for introverts to really show their work as much as extroverts do.
Absolutely. Another question here, kind of relating to those vision statements we talked about, is how do you balance sharing your ideas to achieve promotions and avoiding having your ideas stolen in that attempt?
Question 3.
This is something I talk all about in Speak Up, actually. So a couple of strategies to keep in mind. First is there's a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, when I was first starting my business, who I would come across who'd be like, yeah, I'm working on this amazing business idea. I can't tell you about it because it's not public yet. And I would just be like, come on, man. Like, come on, bruh. Like, what? Really? You know what I mean? We think that everyone's going to just run away with our ideas. And I think people are a little bit more paranoid about that than we need to be. Sometimes that comes from a place of fear that's well-founded. If there's like a history of people swiping each other's ideas in your workplace, fine, sure, be guarded. But being guarded has its consequences too. Sometimes it's just perfectionism in really nice shoes that keeps us from sharing our ideas until they're perfect or until we think they're perfect. And if you're waiting for that day, you're going to be waiting forever. I think ideas are improved through dialogue.
Nods.
So I encourage you to be willing to lower the bar a little bit, be willing to speak up in first draft, because my business wouldn't be where it is today had I not started talking about it before I was ready, before it was perfect. And guess what? Nobody can just do your idea. Nobody can just implement your vision in the way that you would. So have a little more faith in your ability to be unique, right? You are the only person who knows exactly what you're thinking and dreaming about and how you would approach it. So, I think the guarding of ideas is misguided more often than not. That being said, we hear from women, especially in male-dominated industries, all day who say, yeah, I brought this idea up 2 weeks ago. And then today, James brought up the same idea and everyone thought it was great. Nobody thought it was great when I mentioned it 2 weeks ago. The strategy for that is called amplification. Amplification was popularized back in 2009 or 10, I think, by the women of the Obama White House, who found this kept happening to them with no malintent. This happens all the time because women get interrupted at twice the rate as men, and women's ideas often get co-opted and given credit to other folks for, just because of how we are all unconsciously biased to listen to men as authority figures. Whole lot more on that if we ever want to go there. But amplification is getting your allies ready to back you up. So when James brings up my idea in the meeting, Ellie and Kirby are there to say, I think Emilie pitched that 2 weeks ago. Isn't that Emily's idea? So that someone else can help amplify me and give me credit. And guess what? If you don't have any allies in the room, be your own amplification and say, James, yes, that's exactly why I pitched this idea 2 weeks ago. Is that a little uncomfortable? Is it very assertive? Yeah. But is it worth it to get credit where credit is due? Absolutely. And just to be clear, I work with companies where men have the biggest opportunity to be allies. Tech companies, law firms, finance companies, which traditionally are male dominated. I work with men who say, okay, how do I amplify? How do I be an ally? How do I make sure that women and people of color whose ideas are marginally or are historically marginalized get credit where credit is due? And a lot of this has to do with people across the gender spectrum speaking up and being allies in action in amplifying and giving credit where credit is due. As you can tell, I love this stuff. So if you're looking to learn more about our offerings, our Level Up Leadership Accelerator is launching very soon. Hired is our job search accelerator, which is also available, and Speak Up is selling out now for July. You can always hop on a free consultation call with a member of our team at bossedup.org/let's chat to learn more about our offerings and see if what we have to offer is right for you. We'll always level with you on that and be super clear. If it's not the right fit, we'll send you on your merry way with lots of our free resources too. But thanks, Brandy, so much for this time together.
Yeah. And if you found this to be helpful, check out our other Jobcasts at indeed.com/jobcast and follow Indeed on social media. You can see a bunch of the past webinars we've done with Emilie there as well. If you have questions for Emilie or the Indeed team, be sure to comment those below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more career advice content. Thanks for watching.
Text, thank you. Jobcast by Indeed. Copyright 2020 Indeed.